Israeli Defense Forces have began their invasion into Gaza. Now, they're taking the very traditional and safe route of not sending all of their forces into Gaza, but doing it with small raids. As I was editing this video, Israel actually just gave one last warning and a means to get out of northern Gaza. There are two safe routes that Israel will not attack from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Israeli time. And so because of this, Israel knows that this is a terrible tactical move. They've even said it publicly, and Hamas could just use these routes to evacuate northern Gaza as well. So we'll see what happens, but either way, Israel has had no choice but to give a means and way for people to escape northern Gaza. Now, as we know, Israel has been saying we're going on to the next stages of war, so the obvious implication was going to invade Gaza. Israel has also been pounding Gaza left and right with their air campaign, but not only that, asking 1.1 million people to evacuate the northern sector of Gaza and push everyone to the south. Now, with Israeli Defense Forces starting their raids into Gaza, they are gathering sample sizes for the big military, what to expect, cleared routes, possibly finding hostages. They're doing whatever it takes to ensure that at least Israel can get some sort of foothold into Gaza and then from there continue operations. What's really interesting is that despite the raids and despite soldiers finally getting into Gaza, Hamas is still firing rockets back into Israel. The other massive goal for these raids was to figure out how many civilians are still in the area that Israel has requested the people of Gaza to leave, because Israel will quite literally be facing a meat shield trying to get to Hamas. Hamas does not want and they cannot allow their civilians to leave them. If they do, it's going to be one-on-one, and Hamas knows they cannot handle the fight. Now, of course, Israel has been extremely vague about these raids into Gaza. They don't want the public knowing exactly what they're doing. However, they're letting people know it's happening and we're getting closer and closer to an all-out invasion. I have to mention this. The United States looks like they're going to add another carrier into the region. The only issue is there was a delay to get it into the Mediterranean because according to the United States, they want to bolster up at full force. They want to make sure they have a full fleet, a powerful fleet, and get them over into the Mediterranean as soon as possible, but with the highest of quality. Now, this can mean everything from making sure everything is absolutely good to go. All the jets are fixed, there's no issues anywhere, you have the best personnel on the ships, stuff like that. Now, we gotta give a little credit to the British because they are also in the region of the Mediterranean to help Israel, but they were also spotted flying their reconnaissance plane in the region to protect Israel. This is massive for Israel to have the United States and to have the British in the area to protect Israel. Now, there's no indication that the United States is going to be involved directly with the invasion into Gaza. What the United States and the British are doing, they're essentially acting like the bodyguards or the big brother to Israel, because in case anyone wants to intervene from the flanks of Israel, maybe through Syria, maybe Hezbollah is going to get a little froggy, the United States and the British are there to protect Israel and to fight back. Now, if you're wondering why the United States is back in the Middle East, consider the U.S. has casualties in Israel, and there are also U.S. hostages being held by Hamas. So the United States always has had the policy of we're going to get our people back. Something else we have to consider is that the United States has a force posture change, and they obviously know something we don't know if they're willing to deploy another fleet into the region. There's a little bit of a worry that U.S. troops might be in danger in the region, not only Israel. Now, just because Afghanistan is over and you don't hear about Iraq anymore, it doesn't mean the United States is not finished with the Middle East. We are heavily involved in the Middle East. You just don't hear about it too much. We are in Syria, we're in Iraq, and we're in other portions of the world with air assets, so the United States needs to make sure we are protected, as well as Israel, a great ally to the United States. Something else we have to talk about is the fact that UAVs are starting to pop up over Israel. Not Israeli UAVs, but possibly from Hezbollah. Israel doesn't quite know where they're coming from, but all indications point to the north, to Lebanon or either to Syria. And Israel has been dealing with this by using their Iron Dome to take out the UAVs, but not only that, counter-striking immediately. As soon as a UAV is found over Israel, they strike back over Hezbollah targets. Unfortunately, the civilians are the ones who suffer the most from these conflicts, and myself on this channel, I don't support conflict, but in this case, I'm just trying to report what happens. And unfortunately, a Reuters reporter again was taken out because he was just embedded and too close to Hezbollah fighters. Now, as far as Israel's northern front, Hezbollah is still a massive threat, not only in Lebanon, but in Syria. But of course, Israel has said they're going to strike Syria in advance just in case Hezbollah wants to use any routes they already have set, because Hezbollah has a massive presence in Syria, and there is the expectation, and it's probably going to happen, Hezbollah at some point is going to do something big. Everyone is anticipating it. Also consider Iran has been in the region actually talking to Hezbollah, and Hezbollah is known as the extension to Iran. So you can only assume that something is going to happen again, and it's probably going to happen because of Iran. One country that's sort of been on the fence of they do support Palestine, but they obviously support their country way more, is the country of Jordan. They absolutely do not want any issues in their country, and the United States has actually sent more aircraft into their region to help defend Jordan and to help defend other assets in the region. When you start to look at all the moving parts in the Middle East, from Israel to Syria, aircraft carriers to Jordan, Iran, talking to Saudi Arabia, they haven't talked to them in a long time, everything is coming into a weird turmoil, because whose side are you on? Are you on your own side? Do you support Hamas? Do you support Israel? And depending who you support in the region, it could become very dangerous for you. Now, probably the biggest story and the biggest unfortunate thing is that the civilians of Gaza have absolutely nowhere to go. It's very easy for Israel to be like, everyone needs to evacuate northern Gaza, go to the south. And for someone like me who is sitting in my basement quite comfortable and doesn't have to worry about something like that, it's very easy for me to be like, what's the issue? Just go. But what if people have grandparents? What if you're in a hospital? What if you're in a wheelchair? It's not as easy as just getting up and going. In fact, the United States is trying to broker a deal, and allegedly the deal is coming close to where Egypt will allow people of Gaza to leave and stay in Egypt. Now, there are a lot of humanitarian efforts to help the people of Gaza. You have the UN, the Red Cross. Israel has already stated they're not going to stop their siege and they're not going to stop their attacks. But one thing that we should note is that Israel has been way better about warning certain areas. Like, Israel actually told a hospital to evacuate the area. Prior to this, Israel has just been taking out targets left and right and then showing the footage on Twitter and saying, look, we attacked this area because a rocket literally flew from it. You don't need any more evidence. That's why we did it. But then when you wait a few hours, you find out that there's actually way more casualties than the guy who fired the rocket. And that's what's happening continuously in Gaza. So as far as this mass exodus out of the northern regions of Gaza, these people don't want to leave their nation. And obviously they call it Palestine. I'm referring to it as Gaza. Now understand, Egypt, they can't accept all these people, and they don't want to accept all these people. So the United States is trying to broker some sort of deal to at least allow foreign nationals to leave and get out of Egypt. But again, Egypt is very reluctant to take on this humanitarian effort. This is also something that Israel will have the responsibility of dealing with, especially if they're on this mission to go into Gaza and to quite literally flatten it out, because that's what's happening in northern Gaza. What is going to happen with all of these civilians? Again, you can tell them to evacuate, but where are you going to go? It is a massive humanitarian effort, and I think it's important we point it out. Israel knows it's happening, and Israel definitely has a bad feeling about it. Like, they feel bad about what's happening, but again, when you look at it from both sides, the things that happened to Israel and the video evidence that's coming out, Israel doesn't care. They're going after the guys who struck Israel, and they need to take them out immediately. The last thing I want to end on are the hostages that are stuck in Gaza. Understand this: Hamas does not abide by the rules of war. And Israel actually did an amazing thing. They said, "We will stop the siege and we'll stop attacking Gaza if you give us the hostages." And what does Hamas do? They fire back into Israel. And so because of this, we do have U.S. special operations in Israel, and Israel keeps talking about the hostages. But if we're going to be honest with ourselves, it's going to be an absolute miracle if they can get them out of Hamas. I pray to God that, and I mean this, that these hostages are still alive and they are still okay. But understand this, again, Hamas was not even willing to do any sort of trade or negotiate with Israel over these hostages. If anything, they said this: 13 of the hostages we took are no longer around because of the air campaign from Israel. And whether we take it as a bluff, Hamas has shown that sometimes what they say is true, sometimes what they say is fake. Unfortunately, though, it might be true. So the air campaigns are continuing. The ground raids are continuing. These are the first steps to an all-out invasion. A lot of it's going to be on how quick can Israel get into Gaza and complete their objectives, but this is going to be a very difficult ground campaign.